What made Rome great? There were many factors, but certainly the most overlooked was the money system of the Roman Republic. About 300 BC, the Roman Republic supplied the people with a plentiful form of cheap money, money made from copper and bronze. Then they spent this cheap money into the economy. It was a revolutionary idea. Today, opponents of this money system call it fiat money, money not backed by precious metals. But what the Roman Republicans had discovered was that it doesn't matter what backs the money. All that matters is who controls its quantity. Did it work back then? It was amazingly effective. Unlike today, it was a money system created without debt to the government. Flash forward 7 centuries to 1100 AD in England. There were no banks like we think of them today. What served as banks were the goldsmiths, those who made their gold into gold coins. Although most people didn't understand it, these goldsmiths controlled the economy of the nation and thereby even the politics, even in a monarchy. By acting in concert, goldsmiths could either make money scarce or plentiful. When they made their gold money plentiful, the economy of the nation flourished. When they made their gold coins scarce, a depression set in, and they could buy up assets for pennies on the dollar. About 1100 AD, King Henry I, the son of England's first Norman king, William the Conqueror, was low on gold money. A series of costly wars had depleted the royal treasury. So just as colonial Pennsylvania would do hundreds of years later, Henry created a unique form of government-issued money called tally sticks. Tally sticks did not represent any quantity of gold or any other commodity. They were simply polished sticks of wood issued by the king, which he declared to be good for the payment of taxes. That made tally sticks just as good as any other form of money. All right, here we are in the Bank of England Museum with curator John Keyworth, and I'm holding in my hand one of the oldest forms of British money. This is called a tally stick. This is actually a very rare example of a tally stick because it has the two halves of the tally stick.
The idea with the tally stick was that you cut notches in a piece of wood. Usually it was hazel, and these notches were of a prescribed size dimension.
This side is called the
stop, and this is the foil. Which
so the foil would be spent into existence, and the idea was that this splitting the stick down the middle was to prevent counterfeiting, because of course a stick splits uniquely down the middle.
The two pieces were put together, and if they didn't tally, something was awry.
The longer half of a tally stick was called the stock, the root word for stocks and bonds or stockholders. For centuries, the supporters of gold-backed money have belittled tally sticks as an unimportant form of fiat money, one not backed by gold or silver. Some authors even claim that tallies weren't a real money system because they were only used for very large transactions, but that's just not the case. And was this the common size of tally sticks?
In the Middle Ages, the average size was reckoned to be the length from the tip of his thumb to the tip of his forefinger, quite short. Because if you think of it in terms of this is £6,000. That means it's a huge, huge sum of money.
So the wider the spacing, the larger the
larger the amount. But it was a prescribed distance. It was an inch, and I think half an inch for hundreds and a quarter of an inch for tens. And then it became little lines drawn across with a saw.
So it is clear that tally sticks were used for smaller denominations too, and worked well as an effective debt-free money system for 726 years. Without the crushing weight of debt-based money, England flourished into the greatest power on earth for many centuries. At their peak, it has been estimated that 95% of English money was in the form of tally sticks. Two years after the U.S. Constitution was signed, debt-free money was tried in Sweden in 1789, but with tragic results. To pursue a war with Russia, King Gustav III persuaded the Swedish Parliament to print debt-free money called riksgälds. This was very costly to the bankers. Sweden had learned the secret of simply printing its own money without debt. In 1792, only 3 years into the experiment, King Gustav was assassinated by moneylender Jacob Johan Ankerström. As is frequently the case in time of war, too many riksgälds were printed. The quantity was not controlled. A nation will sacrifice everything for survival during time of war. So inflation ruined the debt-free money experiment in Sweden by 1834, just as it had a few years earlier during the American Revolution, again because the quantity was not controlled. Pre-revolutionary America was still relatively poor. There was a severe shortage of precious metal coins to trade for goods, so the early colonists were increasingly forced to experiment with printing their own homegrown paper money. This paper money was called colonial scrip. Colonial scrip was a dangerous concept for bankers. It broke the colonies free of the privately owned central bank system where money had to be created by banks and then loaned to governments, as Franklin put it.
In the colonies, we issue our own money. It is called colonial scrip. We control its purchasing power, and we have no interest to pay to no one.
By the outbreak of the Revolution in April 1775, the colonies started printing a new form of paper money to finance the war. It was called continental currency because, unlike colonial scrip, it was the first issued by the new central government. Continentals worked great at first, but then the British started counterfeiting it massively, sending it to America literally by the bale. By the end of the war, the currency was virtually worthless. As George Washington lamented, a wagon load of money will scarcely purchase a wagon load of provisions. Earlier, colonial scrip had worked because just enough was issued to facilitate trade and counterfeiting was minimal. In other words, the quantity was controlled by the government that issued it. Then Lincoln came up with the most brilliant idea of his presidency. He decided to return to America's colonial monetary roots, have the government issue their own money. So that is exactly what Lincoln did. From 1862 to 1865, he printed $450 million of the new bills, which he called U.S. notes. To distinguish them from debt-based money, he had them printed in green ink on the back with a red seal on the front. That's why the notes were called greenbacks. Since Congress had declared greenbacks to be legal tender for all debts, Lincoln was able to pay his troops and buy their supplies with this new money, all created at no interest to the federal government. As MIT professor Dr. Davis Rich Dewey would write 40 years later in his Financial History of the United States,
the underlying idea in the greenback philosophy is that the issue of currency is a function of the government, a sovereign right which ought not to be delegated to corporations.
But the bankers were not done bringing post-Civil War America to its knees. They wanted to take all silver money out of the system and make only gold be money. In 1872, a British banker named Ernest Zed was given £100,000, about $5 million in today's money, by the Bank of England and sent to America to bribe the necessary congressmen to get silver demonetized to further reduce the money supply. The Bank of England wanted America's money in their control, and what better way to achieve that than mandating a gold-only money system? The next year, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1873, and the minting of silver dollars abruptly stopped. Newspapers derided the act as the crime of '73. Everybody knew about it. The average American hated it. Demonetizing silver made money even more scarce. It put the bankers, who were the primary holders of gold, in even greater control of America.
Whoever controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. And when you realize that the entire system is very easily controlled, one way or another, by a few powerful men at the top, You will not have to be told how periods of inflation and depression originate.
After Garfield's assassination, the Depression deepened, leaving the unemployed to face poverty and starvation. Produce was left to rot in the fields. The country was facing poverty amidst plenty because there was insufficient money in circulation to keep the wheels of trade turning. The country sorely needed the sort of liquidity urged by Lincoln and the Greenbackers, but the bankers insisted that allowing the government to print its own money would be dangerously inflationary. That was their argument, but critics called it humbuggery.
The original populist solution was government-issued money called greenbacks. But the Greenbacker movement had failed, so the populists had switched to expanding the money supply with government-issued silver coins. The underlying dispute, however, was not what money was made of, but who should issue it, private bankers or the people themselves through their representative government. Some believe the economic crisis that began in 2008 is still being completely manipulated by the big banks. But it is more likely that their debt money system has finally spiraled out of even their control.
According to Reuters, the world's largest news service, the world's money supply had nearly been cut in half in the previous 15 months.
40% of the world's wealth was destroyed in the last 5 quarters. It is an almost incomprehensible number.
And how does that compare to the Great Depression of the 1930s? Nobel Prize-winning economist Milton Friedman put it this way in his 1996 interview with National Public Radio.
The Federal Reserve definitely caused the Great Depression by contracting the amount of currency in circulation by 1/3 from 1929 to 1933.
In other words, by January of 2009, the world's money supply had been contracted more than that which caused the Great Depression in America in the 1930s.
In 2008 and 2009, nations poured unprecedented money into the system to prevent its collapse. At the very least, unprecedented inflation will surely follow. The government should issue and control the quantity of money, and commercial banks can only lend out the money they actually have. Most monetary reform advocates today argue that the solution to our current economic woes is a return to a gold standard. This would require that our money be backed by a certain percentage of gold. Interestingly, they use the same terms that bankers of the late 19th century used. They called gold-backed money honest money and constitutional money. Gold bugs today try to claim that because paper money didn't work during the Revolutionary War, it shouldn't be used today. But keep in mind, it doesn't matter what backs your money. All that matters is who controls its quantity. Will it be your elected officials, or will it be some unelectable banker? Colonial paper money before the Revolution had worked so well that the Bank of England had Parliament outlawed and forced America to use only gold money, gold which they controlled.